Joel Sherman of the New York Post wrote a column today about what he called a Hail Mary contract for Harvey. Here's what it looks like. 5 years, $119 million total. At first, he gets a significant raise, but not free agent level money. $12 million for 2017, $17 million for 2018. Then comes the free agency money, $30 million annually. Andy, does this potentially make sense for both sides?
Well, I think the first thing we need to stress, of course, Doug, is that before people get all excited, that was a hypothetical. It was an interesting idea by Joel over at the Post, but it's not something that these sides have talked about. They haven't had any contract talks, is what I'm told. Joel didn't portray that they did. To your question, Doug, over whether it makes sense, to me this makes a lot of sense for the Mets because they can kick that can down the road in terms of, is Harvey going to stay? You know, the fans are already so worried about this to the point where Sandy Alderson has to say, guys, relax. We have him for a couple more years. So it does make sense if they can stomach that $30 million when you don't know what a pitcher's health is going to be down the line. It does allow them to have him through a few of those free agent years, but not that super long-term deal that the Mets and Sandy Alderson would never, ever do. 7-year contract for a pitcher, not happening. For Harvey, it depends if he wants to bet on himself. It makes sense if he wants cash now, and that's a lot of cash. But he's somebody who's been speaking openly for years about wanting to be that $200 million kind of guy, and this would preclude that. He'd be a free agent again, I believe, at 33 on this plan, so that's not ideal for a pitcher.
Right, and he's going to be a little older, as you just said, 33 years old. If he's in his early 20s, maybe this is a whole different discussion. All right, hypothetical contract aside, is it a foregone conclusion at this point that Matt Harvey leaves the Mets?
Well, it's an interesting question to ask 2 years before free agency, Doug, but for some reason, this idea has taken hold, not just the fan base, inside that organization, like a gallows humor that I've picked up on for a couple of years now, like, oh, sure, he's staying. And to be fair to Matt, they've never approached the agent. I mean, they haven't talked about this yet, but because of his public comments, because of Scott Boris's history of generally maximizing what he can get for players, taking them to free agency, I would say not a foregone conclusion, but here's the comp that I would make. Yoenis Cespedes. That was basically a done deal that he was leaving. There was like a 1% chance that he might stay. Guess what happened? The 1% chance, right? He stayed. So I'd put Harvey in that category. I think he's going to play for another team at some point, but weird stuff happens.
So Cespedes is a good comparison in that regard, but it's important in contract discussions to bring up precedents. Is there any precedence in this case around baseball that would lead to a Matt Harvey extension down the road with the Mets?
Well, the important thing to mention here is what Scott Boras, the aforementioned agent, has done in the past, because everyone goes, oh, Scott Boras, he's gone. And yes, that is usually true. But there have been instances, Jared Weaver from the Angels, 2012, 5 years, $85 million, and then Cargo with the Rockies in 2011 did a 7-year deal for $80 million, both way below market, because the client goes to Boras and says, I like it here, I want the financial security now, I want to stay. And the clients are running the show here. Boras has a lot of sway, but if a player goes to him and says, you're my agent, I want this done, or, you know, wink, wink, I'll get a new agent, then they'll get this done. So it has happened. Do I expect it to happen for Harvey? No, but it's not like Boras never does it.
So you mentioned that part of Matt Harvey accepting this contract that Joel Sherman pitches out there is getting cash now. Is it possible that the fact that he's had Tommy John, knows how quickly a career can come to a halt, would make him accept cash now compared to another player who may think, oh, I've got 10 years ahead of me, no problem? Yeah,
it's an interesting question. He has been very vague about his comments with the contract stuff. He's answered it respectfully, but he hasn't been willing to go into that kind of detail. He said in terms of just appreciating the moment. I remember it was pretty powerful last year. Standing next to Matt Harvey after he made his first start of the regular season in Washington last year, and he was saying, I am just a different person in terms of the way I'm appreciating this. I used to be young and stupid and think it would last forever. Now I'm not. Does that thought extend to money? He has never said, and I can't leap inside his head, but I do know that injury changes perspective, at least on the be in the moment front. So, yeah, we'll see where it leads.